just starting today. This is Devland's Innovate Next. It's a series that we kind of conjured together. We've been in a lot of conversations with Jake and other folks, and we find these people very interesting, the work that they're doing as it aligns to our centric work around studios, but also around entrepreneurship. And I thought it'd be a really great way to just buzz into a conversation. Myself, I'm one of the managing partners at Devland. It's an innovation studio, and we focus on R&D and frontier technology. We got our start early, really just wrestling at it, helping entrepreneurs figure out some of their technology and software needs in the beginning, and then over time just got deeper into building infrastructural models for business as a whole, and trying to catalyze new changes and innovation around startup building. And so I have my friend here today, Jake Hurwitz from Jack Spades, who's also a pretty person, I would say a person to know in the studio space, but I'll let him introduce himself and then we can get this conversation started.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Miles. This is going to be cool. So yeah, like you mentioned, I'm a partner at Jack Spades. We're a new startup studio. We're going fully remote startup studio forever, which hasn't really been done much. I think there's maybe one other out there that I've heard of. Looking back a bit, I failed miserably, but it was fun. And then I've had a series of ventures starting when I was 18, and then another when I was 20, and then another when I was 22. I got into the studio world right after I graduated from undergraduate in college, and haven't looked back ever since. So I was a VP of branding at Boulder Bits, which was, we were a studio based out of Boulder, Colorado. And then my team and I there, we co-founded the Global Startup Studio Network, which at the time was basically just a Slack channel helping startup studios connect. But over the course of like 6 very fast months, it grew very quickly. That got acquired by the Global Accelerator Network last January, so a little over a year and a half ago, which was when I went to then, I moved on from Boulder Bits. We shut down because our CEO and sole investor had some health issues. So that's when I started consulting and helping a bunch of new studios around the world. So got to see this model in all different shapes and sizes, all different flavors in every corner of the earth over the last year or so. COVID hit. I feel like I keep saying when COVID hit or when COVID hit. Anyway, COVID hit in March, and it completely rocked the boat, I think, for startup studios everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
It killed many of them, and it also created opportunities for many new ones to flourish in a unique way. So I spent a couple months in the beginning of COVID basically just researching, trying to figure out what comes next for the studio world. Decided now's a really good time to start my own and start the one that I've always wanted to build. So we're playing off of a lot of current trends. So long story short, we're a always remote startup studio building for the future of work. Super heads down with fundraising these days and just getting it off the ground, but it's been really fun.
How would you describe studios? I know there's a kind of a mixed crowd in terms of folks and their familiarity, but how would you frame studios? And I'll take a stab at it as well, kind of how we define it.
Yeah, well, first it depends who I'm talking to. I always try to qualify like what they know already. In this case, I think I have a pretty good idea. I say a studio is a type of incubator. I often say it's a new type of incubator. It's not new because the first studio was founded in 1996, but it's new to the public because no one really heard about this until like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago. Essentially, the differences in this type of incubator versus others, and I often compare it to the accelerator model. I say studios are companies that build startups from scratch. They start by going after great founders and build startups around them, or they start with great ideas, build the startup, basically get something to the market, and then attract the team to run that company. It's different from an accelerator where instead of investing in basically seed rounds and startups that already exist, we're building them from scratch. Studios invest more money into a startup from the beginning. They basically operate as the founder. So they're on the cap table, typically having founder shares. They have much more equity in those companies, and they work on them for much longer. So some of the brief numbers we could jot down are like an accelerator typically invests around 100K in each startup. A studio would invest usually 2 to 500K. An accelerator usually works on a startup or in a cohort-like fashion for 3 months, and you get a couple hours a week with each startup. The studio basically works full time on each startup for at least 3 to 6, sometimes 9 to 12 months. And then equity, an accelerator would usually take like around 10%, maybe less. Studio usually takes like 30 to 50%.
Yeah. I remember when we got started, it was kind of like product as a CPO as a service was a lot of the language we use. But over time, it was just really understanding that initially founding teams would come to us and say, hey, you know, we know you guys do software good. Can you help us out a little bit? But after getting into the thick of it, we realized that there were a lot of other needs that they had as they were growing. So it became a much bigger puzzle. And I think that we describe it in a similar way.
Yeah.
You know, the idea around an incubator, a new form of incubator, we've also said like the next gen private equity.
With much less money.
yeah, much less money. And well, first checks, just really around that first check behavior and early stage, what early stage actually is. But you know, a co-founder at best, like you're a co-founder and partner, but I think recently a way that we've been describing it is like a private industry PhD. And we want entrepreneurs, researchers, and founders to really believe in the complete life cycle of what they can generate as individuals and teams, not limited to the venture that they're focused on right now, or maybe it's not even a venture yet, it's an idea. So I think that's always been it was an awakening for us. So I guess we chose to share it with others and grow that philosophy over time.
Totally.
What are you working on specifically at Jack Spades right now? And like, what is your focus in terms of the types of companies or the types of entrepreneurs?
Yeah. So company wise, we pretty much only build SaaS tools. So B2B or B2C. You know, I'm not going to manufacture t-shirts or food and bev or anything like that, just because we don't know how very well. We love tech. And for us, my partners and I, we all come from a marketing and design background and an experience UX background, which actually is, based off my research, wildly overlooked in the studio space, wildly overlooked in venture building in general. But for us, we put an incredible emphasis on experience, on UX and brand. And we believe our whole thesis is around, if we're building startups from scratch that are heavily branded, heavily experiential, and really make a lasting impact. Basically, we call it the 12-star experience. Everything we're building, we're seeking that 12-star experience, even from MVP and beta. That drives a lot more trust with users. And so it gives us actually a better validation process, a less biased validation process. That's our thesis there. When it comes to types of startups we're building, we're a future of work startup studio. We're actually in the middle right now of developing, like, what does future of work mean to us? Basically our manifesto and our core pillars. I can give some high level footnotes there, but the term future of work, I think, is wildly undervalued right now, or wildly underestimated. Most people, at least that I've talked to recently, they hear future of work and they think productivity tools, communication tools, and collaboration tools. So like new types of Slack and Zoom and stuff like that. I think this actually goes about 105 levels beyond that. And it's all rooted in remote work. So remote is not going anywhere. It's certainly going to mature and people are going to figure it out, and not everyone's going to work from home forever, but I don't see it going anywhere. We don't see it going anywhere. And when you ask yourself or ask anybody, okay, what does remote enable for you? It essentially allows you to live anywhere in the world, right? And the next question is, okay, how is your life going to change if you can live anywhere in the world? Your entire life's going to change. It's going to change the food that you eat. It's going to change the people you hang out with. It's going to change the hours of the day that you're working. It's going to change your relationships, your family, your music taste, the types of clothes you wear. It changes everything. And so what we're building for is, number one, that transition to this new type of life. And then we're building for the upside of that, which is once now people are settled in and they're living on a beach somewhere and connecting with folks 8 hours ahead east and 9 hours behind west. You need it changes your life drastically. So we're building tools all around that. Personally, my partners, between the three of us, we each have our own sort of subsections of future of work that we care the most about. I love the restaurant industry and I love hospitality. I love travel. And so I'm very interested in things like, I'll give a personal example that it's been on my mind a lot lately. When COVID started to get intense, I was in New York City and my lease was up, and I figured, okay, I'm going to leave New York and just kind of be on the road for a bit. I can go Airbnb or stay with friends or be in a more secluded spot. Mm-hmm. The most difficult thing in that entire transition was a car. Yeah. I was like, all right, I want to go live in Colorado for 2 months. I need a car. Where do I get one? Well, I don't want to buy one. I can't lease one because that's like a 24 to 36 month lease at least. Renting one on Hertz and Budget or Avis or any of those is better for like a couple weeks. Where do I get a car in this middle ground? I can't borrow one from a friend. No friend's going to lend me their car. I ended up finding one site that is kind of in that niche middle ground. And I'm spending like $500 some odd a month for a car, which actually is reasonable. But the experience of just trying to get a car for me to travel for business for a longer period of time was so difficult. Insurance was tough. Getting it in the first place was tough. Paying for it was tough. We need to build better things like that. That's what I'm most excited about these days is enabling easier travel, easier hospitality, a better ability for people to live and work more harmoniously anywhere at any time.
Yeah. I see that trend really forming as, technology has really opened the door for us to personalize things more, to make technology specific around the needs of use cases that have previously been, just underestimated, unviewed, or just, edge cases on the latter end of what you're working on. And so, yeah, we've been seeing a similar trend in that regard. Like, remote has always been centric to our culture as well from the beginning.
Yep.
We work in a more, I'll say, tangible, physical, like material standpoint. So we have a need to be on site, but that need is, really just based on when it is the most essential or priority. But otherwise, we're really focused on how we leverage tools for that same regard. So we're always thinking about that as product folks, and we have our hat on for it. It's interesting to think of it that way because in a lot of ways, you've seen a lot of companies recently start to look more like widgets or features of a larger thing. And studios have an interesting role to play because you can kind of play around with things that are like smaller, kind of feature-like products or larger platforms. Like where do you think the future is in startups, and kind of what language do you use to describe the difference between thinkers that are working on things that are more feature related versus folks that are building out large platform type infrastructure that's going to shift?
There's a couple ways I think about it. It's a great question. One way is in the sense of like what we learn about innovation in business school, right? How there's like incremental innovation, which is just slight changes. Then there's, I think, like revolutionary innovation. Forgot the exact terms because I actually didn't go to class that much. I was too busy building startups. But there's innovation that completely changes the game. And then there, in the sense of like you go from 0 to 1 or 1 to 10, and there's innovation that's like 1 to 1,000 where you create something entirely new forever. That's one way to think about it. I think studios need to play in that middle ground because like for me to create something entirely new forever that no one's ever seen before, a new hovercraft or some crazy shit, just requires an incredible amount of capital typically. And while studios sometimes have an incredible amount of capital, like it's too big of a fish to fry. Then there's the small end where, they're little widgets or tools that at the end of the day, a studio is a fund, right? You have to return capital. I don't necessarily see how a little widget is going to return capital unless you get real lucky with something like Grammarly. I mean, Grammarly got bought for what, like $1 billion or something. That was a great acquisition, but I'm not placing bets in that arena. Another way I describe this, though, which is the one I care the most about, is in the arena of impact. A friend / mentor / colleague of mine, Tom Higley, he runs a studio called X Genesis out in Denver. He describes this as dog walking apps. And so X Genesis is all about solving wicked problems, big, significant problems that affect humanity. I like that because it gives you a reason to get out of bed every morning. And what he said at their demo day a few years ago, I was sitting in the front row, and he was like, we're not here to build any more dog walking apps. And I really liked that. I really resonated with that because at the end of the day, look, we don't need more dog walking apps. We don't need more direct to consumer sock companies. We don't need new lollipops that turn into, you know, gum. Like, we don't need stupid shit like that.
Yeah.
Humanity needs some serious stuff. And so I like to differentiate founders very early on based off of the type of impact they're interested in having. And I ask certain questions like, okay, what are you building? And they'll pitch me. And then I typically have to ask, okay, what's the problem you're solving? And most of the time, 9 out of 10, 90% of the time, I'd say these problems are pretty insignificant. Entrepreneurs have been trained and bred, and I almost want to say brainwashed over the last decade to like find this niche little opportunity to make a quick buck, use a bunch of tools to build it, and then sell and move on. But it's like, where's the soul in that?
Yeah.
People don't buy soulless things. They buy things that solve serious problems for them in their life. When it comes to B2B tools, it's a little bit of a different story. But at the same time, it's really not. It's kind of the same thing. So it's a high level, a little meta version of answering your question. But long story short, the way to sum it up, I would say, is like for a studio in particular, I like to play in the middle where they're not tiny, but they're not too big. They're not moonshots.
Yeah. And I think that's a good staging, because a lot of times what studios work on in the middle space are kind of a prelude to something that's much larger, much bigger, and it's kind of like the first stab at it in a lot of ways. I was recently having a conversation with the consortium we formed called Spectra. There's a lot of different studio leads in there, and we constantly talk about, you know, we've been highly focused on VC as far as capital injections. And, you know, there's a sexy side of it. You see all these TechCrunch articles and these founders with these big raises. You know, on the opposite end, you kind of look at the returns and kind of the profile of VCs over this past 10 years. And it's getting, frankly, harder for everybody in the space. But I would say that it's getting certainly a little bit more difficult to be a VC and for venture to exist in that way. What do you think is kind of, in translating your understanding of the opportunity around studios, like what do you think is the biggest struggle that VCs are having with early stage and just in general? Yeah.
The way I would sum it up, and I'll share my, I don't know, about 8 years of research. I've been so obsessed with this, and now I've got I think a thesis of what I'm seeing. To sum it up, I'd say venture has, I don't want to keep using the word brainwashed, but the market of entrepreneurs has been very focused on fundraising over the last decade.
Yeah.
A little anecdote. I was giving a talk on Monday this past week to a bunch of college students, undergraduate students, some of which were like about to start college. They were young, 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And about entrepreneurship. These are the students that were interested in starting companies at some point over the next 5 years. And they just kept asking about, like, how do I raise money? How do I get investors? What's the first step in getting investors and all that? And I was like, I almost got angry about it at the fact that, like, this is the goal. The goal is in people's minds, like, oh, I have an idea, go find investors. Go raise some money. Go convince a rich person that this is a good enough idea that they should pay me to build it. I'm like, no, guys, I mean, I understand why we're thinking that, because we've romanticized the Series A and the Series B. But I'm like, you want to be a good entrepreneur, learn how to take $3 and turn it into $5. Learn how to build something for less than you sell it for and make some money. Like, whatever happened to business building? Right? Figure that out. And so my recommendation to all of these students essentially was like, just go build a business. To bring it back to earth a little bit, what I'm seeing is that ventures moving later, checks are getting bigger. VCs are interested in not turning $1 million into $3 million, but turning 5 million into 20 or 20 into 100, right? So what that leaves is a really nasty gap for early stage founders, which puts them in this little bit of a circle where it's like, all right, I want to get to VC eventually. How do I get there? Well, I need to go to an accelerator program that'll accelerate my path to VC. Okay, so what do I need to get into the accelerator? I need to make a good pitch. I need to network my way in. I need to have some like basic unit economics, but the biggest emphasis there is the second one that I said, which is network my way in.
Yeah.
Most accelerators are accepting seed stage teams and products that are not really validated by the market yet. And I think the stat is like 80% of companies that come into a startup look different than the day they leave. I'm sorry, that come into an accelerator look different than the day they leave. So that means that the products that are being built are pre-product market fit. So by the time it gets to the desk of the VC, it's still, for the most part, a poorly validated concept that's just starting to get some traction with a niche group. Now, VCs are really smart and they caught on to that. So they're basically saying, like, I don't know, I don't want to write a check for something this early, this immature. I want to write a check for something that's getting some serious traction, and I can look at the numbers and see, like, we can create a good looking cash flow statement off of this, right? So the gap there that I personally am playing in is in the 0 to 0.1 stage, where there's no idea yet. Yeah. There's no business yet. There's nothing yet. All you have is a great founder. That's the stage that I think is being wildly overlooked, which is how do you validate something, and that by the time it ever even sees the light of day, you feel very confident that this thing either has early signs of product market fit or does have product market fit. If that's not what we're seeing, then don't write a check for it. Kill it, destroy it. And so the way to completely sum this up is, like, we're not putting anything out to the public unless it is good. And how do you define good? It's making money. It's people are paying for it. It's that simple. So with the studio, in our case, like, that's our entire investment thesis strategy. The way to completely close the loop on it is by the time it ever gets to the desk of the VC, it has a higher valuation and is a much less risky play.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, you know, in a recent conversation, I had to clarify that I don't think we're seeing as much movement we are in the vein of founderhood and entrepreneurship without just a symptom of corporate innovation just being at its weakest. You know, I was one of those folks. I ran product divisions and technology teams for a long time. I meet with my executives. The answer was always no. If we were extending any inch or any bit outside of the framing of the product as they understood it. And then frankly, beyond that, we didn't really have hackathons or stuff like that. I think that became like a more recent phenomena inside of a lot of the larger companies. But frankly, I think innovation attitudes are being suppressed in a lot of ways.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, we're in this fourth industrial revolution with a huge opportunity to change and just really solve some of the world's greatest issues. Like, you know, food deserts are a huge thing. If people wanted to build something around that, you know, it'd be an amazing opportunity for them to enter into the space and come up with solutions for that. Yeah. But, you know, I think we're in a time frame where, you know, folks are obsessing over ideas in a way that is just an expression of their need to innovate and have ecosystem to do so. And I think studios have definitely offered them. Something that you said made me rethink something I've been tossing around. Is just, you know, I see previously like studios and the ripeness and opportunity around studios being more so matched to a deficiency in terms of the VC landscape as an asset class. But it sounds like the kind of what we've been seeing with banking and financial products. There's a lot of downstream activity. They're moving down the vertical more so as the fintech horizon of products start to expand. And then private equity, you know, you have VC that's kind of rolling up, going up vertical. And then studio incubators, accelerators are kind of like battling it out and figuring out what the best model is for touching early stage and also just filtering out amazing people, amazing builders.
Totally. So, the way I think about that really since March, so since COVID hit, is we need to bridge the gap between studios. Rather, studios are the vehicle to bridge the gap between entrepreneurs and corporates. When the two are siloed, building on their own, the success rate is really low. Entrepreneurs, it's like 1 out of 10 companies succeed. When corporations launch new things, it's like 0 out of 10 things succeed, or marginally close to 0. When you bring the two together, there's a few asterisks and caveats to this though. When you bring the two together, that success rate jumps to like above 50 or 60%.
Yeah.
I think McKinsey just put out, it was either McKinsey or Bain. They just put out a study a couple months ago on, they're saying 67% success rate for when corporates build with entrepreneurs. The asterisk, though, is that everyone needs to basically stay in their swim lanes and respect each other's building preferences, recognizing that like entrepreneurs, I know this is a bold statement that gets a little pushback at times, but entrepreneurs hate corporations. They don't want to go work there. There's a reason why they're entrepreneurs. And corporations think that they're really good at starting new startups. They're not. They're really good at maintaining $100 billion of cash, but they're not good at launching something from 0 to 1 in 24 hours, right? So when you bring those two cohorts together, an entrepreneur who knows how to build and hack and be lean and basically MVP is their life, and pair them with the resources and the reach and the data and the knowledge of a corporation and the brand, but the corporation respects like, hey, you want to build a website in 24 hours? Like, I'm not going to touch it. And the entrepreneur is basically saying like, please, I'm not going to ask you for your input on this website. Don't touch it. When everybody operates together in that capacity, I think it really we have a shot of solving some serious problems.
Yeah. And we're seeing some signaling around that on all sides. Just corporates try to have academic relationships, and you see how that works typically. They try to have relationships with incubators and accelerators. You see how that works, how that spins. I would say just by market volume, acquisitions are down extremely low, much lower than what we saw in the previous trend. And just as the space evolves, there's a lot of different needs forming, and I think that there's a space for farming talent, ecosystems that extern folks. We've gotten a lot of touches with Gen 2 founders, a fund season exit, and that founding team is like, we did great. What do we do now? We're like, hey, come on to Devland, or come work with us. And in a lot of ways, there's folks exiting corporate, like tenured executives spent 30 years or almost 40 years doing stuff, and they're just starting to feel a little bit, fried in a way of doing the same thing over and over again. Kind of want to touch the excitement of interacting with new ideas and solving problems. So.
One concept, I guess, that I'm keeping my eye open to right now is potentially this waterfall effect of, I think acquisitions may skyrocket soon, because a lot of founders are thinking, a lot of entrepreneurs are like, my business is getting real hard right now. I could sell this thing for $12 million or $5 million even. Like, I'll sell it. I'd like something a little more stable and secure these days because the world's a little volatile. So I think we may see a lot of small acquisitions, or the other side of that is shops being shut down, companies being shut down. Let's say we see all these small acquisitions. Yeah, that founder might be available, but I'm actually more interested in like their team and their second hand, their number 2, their number 3. Because those people, like, they saw the ins and outs of this business. They went through an acquisition. They were there at the table in some capacity. I want to go turn them into the next CEO.
Yeah. No, I forgot. I was watching an interview. I think it was either Mark Cuban or somebody. It's just, if you keep finding yourself in a way of like not wanting to be the person at the top and not wanting to run everything, there's 2 main identities in business. It's the executive, the chief executive, which is more of the sales. There's like the biggest salesperson for the company. And then you have the operators, like the COO and CIO and the other folks that get involved. And so you got to figure out early, which one are you? Are you an operator? Are you a salesperson? Are you have a hybrid of both? Just trying to figure out what it is that you have going on. And in most cases, like you were saying earlier, like the go build something attitude, we talk about that as the lemonade stand. Like, don't tell me about this amazing idea that's 10 years away. Like, what can you go out today, this month, next 90 days and figure out and come back and express to me that you've sold 5 customers on it. My partner Devon is amazing at that. We call him for just the idea that one of our first checks he pitched on a user story, no product, just sold it, because the tactfulness around bridging the building and the fundraising is salesmanship. Like you have to sell, and you have to be relentless at selling, like so active that it's unceasing. And
Totally.
that can be draining for the folks that want to just be in the workshop, want to build and want to focus. So it's kind of knowing your part, really knowing your part. I see still got some folks on. So I want to take some questions really quick. If you guys have some questions, throw them in the chat for Jake or myself. We'll try to go through. We have a good 8 minutes or so. We're open to take questions. Anybody got anything? Just throw us whatever you have. If you're interested in understanding more about the studio model, or any type of question that you might have. There's no dumb question.
There's a big question I've been asking everyone these days. I'm really trying to wrap my head around, and I don't think there's a right answer yet, but I'm just open to so many ideas. Love to get your take on it. Now, this is about community building. And it heavily affects the studio model, and it heavily affects venture capital, where over the last decade, startup communities boomed, right? The Austin startup community, the Boulder startup community, the New York startup community. Well, those communities, the key word in there is in the name of the city. They're bound by geography.
Yeah.
So when a studio pops up and they open up a cool office downtown Austin or downtown Boulder or in any of those cities, they're designing this space to be a geographic hub where the best minds in town filter in and filter out, and you're keeping an eye on everyone's activity so that when it comes to investing and starting new projects within that region, you know who's available and you know where to build. Well, geography is pretty much done now. Yes, it's going to come back in some capacity, but it's no longer the only way that you glue a community together. Now communities are being glued through ideology.
Right.
And it's taking place on the internet. Now, this has been happening for the better part of 5-6 years, but I think this was COVID was the nail in the coffin to really expose this to the masses. And we're seeing within these communities, they're creating their own digital currencies, crypto. They're playing games together, esports and gaming. They are assembling over video, Zoom. Look at Zoom's market cap right now. It's incredible. So the question is, how do we continue to build and thrive and become leaders within communities that are bound by ideology and not geography? And then the second question is, how do we not lose our sense of humanity in that?
Yeah, I think there's a bridge that forms into like the next society that we're looking at. Like for so long, geography has limited opportunity, has limited expression, this discussion, just in terms of access lanes. There's a lot of things that geo and centric geo specifically, kind of, because I want to talk about cities themselves because we talk about design and infrastructure. Cities designed as a centric place that are resource heavy in a way undermines the areas around it because everything is moving into the center. Now with the new focus because of COVID and just like the reality of where we're moving as a civilization is taking us away from these large metros to smaller nodes or smaller communities that are interwoven or connected, but not as top heavy as what we've seen past. And I think that's the important part about it. Is like you have these digital communities forming around ideology that, in a few examples, some of the communities that we've helped form, that help catalyze in-person interaction and things happening on the ground. And to me, that's the best interface. Is like, let me do all the things that are typically points of access or points of resource limitation that keep me outside the circle and overcome that hump using internet technology or digital communities. And then the second step, which is, like the warmest of all the steps, I can now enter in that space with the comfort and calm of just having navigated that situation in a way that, didn't happen past. And I saw that in Bay Area culture too, just since I've been here in Silicon Valley and broader, is just this idea of connectivity being this thing that is digital first. Like I would cold message folks on LinkedIn or email people and actually get coffee meetings the same week. And I thought that was phenomenal because I worked in New York or Houston or Miami, other ecosystems where that wasn't as common. So I think that's the trend, is as we leverage technology to tear down the social architecture, that the barriers that previously disconnected us, I think it will allow for more proper and more optimized physical communities to form in these smaller nodes, which a buddy of mine is part of a new accelerator movement in like Nebraska of all places. And there's some folks trying to move to Wyoming and Bentonville, Arkansas, and random places like that, because now you can, and then you can be a lot more lean and focused around who's there and how everybody integrates with each other. So I think that's part of the puzzle for sure.
Yeah, well said. I'm reading this book right now called The Adaptation Advantage. Definitely would recommend it. I don't remember the exact stat. I'm going to botch this, but basically the idea was like the biggest society in the world is China. The second biggest is Facebook. It was something like that. And I'm going to pull out the book and correct myself on the exact order, but like, that's wild. And there's a lot of laws in China. There's not that many laws on Facebook. There's a lot of order to China. There's not that much order to Facebook. I don't think Facebook was set out to become the biggest society in the world. And there's a lot of questions of morality and ethical practice, and then just like ability to grow that is still in the air there. And I hope startup studio fit into this. How does my startup studio fit into this, right? Like how do we innovate and gather and invest in these communities that are all based off ideology, which is also very dangerous because you get echo chambers within that. So that's the backside to this conversation, which is how to avoid this becoming toxic and becoming just dangerous inherently.
No, for sure. Well, Jake, man, thanks so much for this amazing conversation. It's been awesome. We chatted up all the time, so there's nothing new. But thank you for your time and also dropping gems and allowing for just some nice expression and answering questions. Let people know how they can contact you or connect with you, and like the best ways to do so.
Yeah, totally. I love LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn, so that's the best place. Full name Jake Hurwitz or Jack Spades Startup Studio is how you'll find me. If anyone ever wants to talk startup studios, startups in general, the radical shift in entrepreneurship and foundership that's happening right now beneath our feet, would love to engage in it. That's like my favorite conversation these days. So hit me up anytime. And thanks so much for having me. This was fun, and I always love these conversations.
Yeah, man. Same here. All right. Have a good one. All right.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.